right, so I've got a little introduction here for those of you that might not be familiar with Caz. Caroline Scott is a prominent UK bonsai professional, has a rich background in visual communications, having studied photography, illustration, and graphic design during her 4 years at art college. After a 20-year career as a graphic designer, Caz transitioned to her passion for horticulture, founding her own horticultural business in 2009. Her bonsai journey began in 1989 with a gift of a Buxus harlandi. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Caz?
You are indeed.
Okay. Which ignited her fascination with the art. Without the internet, she relied on books and attended numerous demonstrations at Willowbog Bonsai to deepen her knowledge. Guided by bonsai masters Marco Invernizzi and Peter Warren. How was that?
Marco Invernizzi.
Oh, okay. Marco Invernizzi and Peter Warren. Caz developed a profound respect for the trees, emphasizing patience and continuous learning. She is particularly drawn to conifers, appreciating the artistry and creativity involved in shaping. Her bonsai accolades include exhibiting at the prestigious Ginkgo Bonsai Awards and Trophy, winning the BCI President's Award and earning accolades for her conifers at Expo 23 and the Bonsai Show Live. Beyond bonsai, Caz enjoys painting, drawing, motorbiking, beekeeping, and finding solace and calm in her bonsai practice amidst the chaos of life. And so that's it. Caz, I'll hand it over to you. I did also want to present some examples of Caz's work. So I'm going to share some images here, and you can talk a little bit about each one. Is everyone able? Are you able to see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Right. Hello, everybody. This tree here is a Chinese elm, a cork bark variety. I've had this tree for about 25 years, and it's been developed over the years to build a high ramification on it. It's coming on quite well, as you can probably see. It's in its winter image there. It's been in a few shows over the year, and it's progressing really quite nicely now. Now this tree, as you can probably see on the photograph, is actually at a show. It is a Scots pine, which is the same variety that the demonstration that we were talking about tonight is on. The style obviously is a half cascade. The piece of material originated from David Benavente in Spain. It is a Spanish piece of material, and it's done very well in the shows over the years. And again, it's coming on very nicely. It's doing well for a show. It's got a nice dense amount of foliage now, which you need to have for a show. And yeah, it's a great tree, and it's a tree I'm very proud to be a guardian of. This tree again is at a show where I won Best Conifer at the Expo Awards last year. It is a Juniperus procumbens. Now, from what I know about the history of this tree, it did originate as a piece of material in actually Kimura's garden, and then it went over to Belgium into a collector called Danny Hughes, and then it went to another collector in England called Ian Stewardson, and he passed away, and the tree came to me. And again, I'm extremely proud to be a guardian of this tree. It is a very, very special tree. As you can see, the dead wood on it is fabulous. It's a bit of a prickly customer to work with, as most procumbens are. but it's very, very well developed, and it's in a lovely UK John Pitt pot. This is myself working on what I affectionately call the zigzag pine. As you can probably tell by the trunk line on it, it's rather got quite a lot of dramatic movement on it. This is all natural. It did come from the Italian Alps, I believe. It's again a piece of material that was brought in by my teacher, Marco Invernizzi. It's a Scots pine again. It's a variety of pine that I'm very fond of working with. You can get some great results. And the bottom branch I kept as a gin. This is me particularly working on, and I haven't refined the gin very much, but it has been refined now. And again, it's a tree I really love to work on. It's developing nicely now, and the pot it's in is by a Scottish potter called Ian Bailey. Right, this is another Scots pine. There's a theme going here. This tree originated, this is a true Scots pine. It originated from Scotland, right up at the very top of Scotland, from a mountain called Ben Aigan. It's been in a collection of a variety of people and worked on over the years. And it's been in my collection for quite a while now, and I've refined it. And it's just getting better over time. You can see the negative spaces in the foliage pads, the definition in them foliage pads that make the tree look like a big tree but in miniature. It's a true Scottish pine. Now this is an actual rock planting that I put together. It'll be probably about 20 years ago. And the trees on it are both Juniperus chinensis, so the Chinese juniper. I actually made this rock planting from scratch. The pot it's in is a China mist pot, which is another British potter. And with a huge amount of help, because the rock is very heavy. It's quite a large rock planting. It took a while to establish. The roots now go down completely round the rock, down the back of the rock and into the pot. So now I only have to water the pot. I did originally have a Cotoneaster within the composition as well, but it added a bit too much clutter, so I removed it over the years, and now it is just the two chinensis, and there it is again at a show. And the photograph is probably the best it's ever looked, and I'm really quite proud of that composition.
Susan S. asked any options to zoom in and see the trunk. Things she's talked about. So I think that, like the previous image, so I'm just going to pop back to this for a minute.
Yeah.
Just to zoom in, so people can see in a little more detail.
Yeah. Yeah, it is difficult to judge the sizes of the trees. That particular tree, that Scots pine, that is quite a large tree. I'm trying to think how to. It's probably about 3 foot high. That tree. It's quite a sizable tree. Right. This is another Chinese juniper. Chinensis, it's Yigawa variety. This tree I've had in my collection for a very, very long time. This tree's probably round about. I'm going by the size measurements we use in the UK, so please I do apologise, but this tree's probably about 16 inches high. It's not a big tree. It's around about what you would call the 2-hin size of bonsai. It did originate in Japan. As I say, I've had it a very long time. I've developed it over the years. It's got a very nice live vein movement in it, dead wood with a nice focal point with a lot of gins in there, which draws your eye into the tree, and the flow of the tree going down onto the left-hand side there. But it's another tree that's been in my collection a long time. Now, this is a Pinus thunbergii, the Japanese black pine. It is not an easy species for us to keep in the UK, simply because of our lovely weather, or not, as the case may be. There are lots of grey skies and rainy days. But if you're careful, you can work these trees very well. As I say, this tree was at the expo this year, which is our big bonsai show in the UK, and it won runner-up award for best conifer. Again, this tree is a Japanese piece of Yamadori, and it's been developed over quite a long time. Again, the tree's been in my collection for quite a while, and it's developing nicely. I'm trying to think whereabouts it actually originated from. There's a guy called Dave Hanna. He had this tree originally over in what we call the Lake District in the UK. He moved to Spain, and the tree came to me. So again, it's a good tree. It's got it's an unusual style for black pine. You often see the Japanese grown black pines that are the more kind of formal, upright style of tree, and they don't have the kind of dead wood on the front like this tree has. So it's a little bit unusual, and for that I kind of enjoy this tree rather a lot.
We have a question from Susan S. She says, how do you take care of trees in the UK weather? Greenhouse, grow lights, or special?
How do I take me trees? Sorry?
How do you take care of trees in the UK weather? Greenhouse, grow lights. I guess she's asking, what do you do to kind of, do you do anything to augment
right
the light that it's getting?
That's a good question, because the UK, as most people know, the UK, we don't have the weather on our side a lot of the time. It does rain quite a lot, and because I live in the north of England, very close to the Scottish border, it gets very cold. It's very, as I say, very rainy. So some species of tree can be a bit of a chore to look after. Now, the black pines, I mean, all my trees are outside most of the year, and it isn't the cold that's the issue, it's the wet. So in the winter time, when it's particularly wet, I have got an area which has got a polycarbonate roof over it, so there's plenty of light gets through, but it just keeps the worst of the rain out, and that helps hugely, being able to control how much water they get. I have been known to use grow lights, but to be honest, although we don't get massive amounts of sunlight or sunshine, I should say, for days on end, the lux levels, the light levels are still good, and you can probably see by the condition of my trees that they do very well. I do feed them very well as also, which helps along the way as well. But with the black pine, I do like to give them a little bit of cover so that they don't stay wet for too long, and then they would start to struggle a little bit.
So they do pretty well with just ambient light level on cloudy days.
Yeah, I mean, the light levels are not bad. I mean, even on dull days, the light levels aren't bad at all. We just don't get we're just not lucky enough to get the sun that you guys get. This is another chinensis, another Ichigawa juniper. This is quite an old tree. It's quite an unusual, twisty, gnarly old tree. Again, it originated as a Japanese import. It belonged to the same guy who had the procumbens juniper and passed away, and I was lucky enough to get it off him. But the deadwood on it there is fabulous. This photo image you have of it here, the tree has very recently just had a styling, so you can see the deadwood a little bit better. The original photo of it, where the tree was very, very overgrown, and I've just started to put a bit of definition, a bit of air and light through the tree. They say you should be able to imagine a bird of the same scale flying through the branches of the tree, and you can see some light through the tree there, you know. So, and it's really kind of tallies in very nicely with that old deadwood that it has. It's another tree I'm very, very proud to be a guardian of.
Okay, and did you want to say some stuff about this before we start?
Yeah, this was this demonstration. I've always thought there's lots of videos and all sorts of things about caring for trees, which is great because everybody needs to know how to care for that tree, because there's no point, you know, understanding the aesthetics and the styling of bonsai without actually having a good, healthy tree to begin with. But one of the things I think there's always a lacking in is actually explaining the styling process and how you come to find a front, how you form foliage pads, where you set the apex on a tree. And this is what I've done with this video. I've talked about literally more or less the styling of it, rather than anything to do with the care of the tree. So if anybody's got questions about how to care for a Scots pine, feel free just to answer at the appropriate intervals, and I will endeavour to answer them. But hopefully this will shed a lot of light on the styling of a tree.
All right.
Right, we're going to be working with this Pinus sylvestris, this Scots pine, which was collected from Scotland quite a number of years ago now and has been prepared up for bonsai.
We do have one question. What fertilizer do you use?
Right, again, good question. I use a variety of things, and I feed quite a lot. Obviously, depending what I want to achieve with the trees. With something I'm really trying to push on, like what this Scots pine is, I'll use Biogold pellets or Green Dream pellets. I don't know if you can get them in the States, but they're a little pellet you just sprinkle on the top of the growing medium. Biogold, I'm sure you know what Biogold is. It's a great slow release fertilizer. And then I'll also use a fish emulsion and seaweed watered on once a fortnight.
Okay, and we had a couple other questions. So Michael Way asks, does Scott pine like less sunny or wetter climates like Scotland? Curious.
It's developed, acclimatized and evolved to cope, because it is a native to Scotland, and so they do cope with lower light levels, extreme cold, So it's a good pine for our climate. Years ago now, and has been prepared up for bonsai just for this kind of occasion. So, right, the first thing we need to do when we're looking to start making a tree go down the bonsai path is to look for a front. We need to check the tree all the way around to find out which is going to be the best front for the tree. Now, what we're looking for is best nabari. So it's the best nabari from that side, and turn it right the way around and keep looking at it all the way and have a look. And for me, the best nabari is actually from this side. And the nabari is not the key to having the main front. We've got to look at many other options. So the other options are the trunk line, how the trunk comes out of the ground, out of the nabari, the taper in the trunk, the movement in the trunk, that wonderful flow that this tree has. Now, we have a look and see, is there any straight lines that we need to either take out of the tree, or do we need to hide that with anything? We can hide it with foliage, we can tip the tree in different directions to try to take any flaws away from the tree, because at the minute we have this section here that is a little bit straight, but we could actually hide that with foliage. Now when we turn the tree round, again, we haven't got quite as nice a nabari there, and I feel like this straight section here is a little bit more obvious on this side. So for me, because also what we're looking for is branch placement, and in here we have branches coming out from good positions, and we also have the apex which is coming toward us, which is very important for the design of the tree. So for me, this is the front for this tree. The deadwood on the other side is marginally better, but I think that is ruled out by how nice this nabari is, the lovely bark, the fantastic movement in this tree, the branch placement and the apex. So it's got more pointers for it on this front as it has from the other front. So decision made, I think this is going to be the front of the tree. So this is the proposed nabari. As you can see, we've got quite a wide placement of the root mass there. Very, very nice root system, albeit a little bit high on this side, but we've got a lot of roots coming down here, which is going to make a nice splayed out nabari. And as you can probably see, as I turn the tree round, the nabari on the other side is okay, but it's not quite as nice. It's still got some quite nice root features here, but there isn't anything in this vicinity here, which is a bit of a shame. So that's one of the reasons why the other side is going to be used as the front predominantly. Now, one of the other reasons why this side is so good is because this movement in the trunk, this lovely bark, this following this line of tells of a tree high up on the mountains that's been weathered quite substantially, and we've got this gorgeous movement in the trunk. Branch placement, although I think this one here will probably be removed because of where it's coming out from, leaving these rather strange negative spaces in this bit here. This will be our main branch there, and we've also got a really nice apex coming towards us in there with lots of branches where we can start to dome our apex from. So as you can see, fantastic movement, lovely bark. So now,
okay, before we continue, does anyone have any questions? And this is the fade that you were referring to, right, Caz?
Sorry, say that again.
Oh, I mean, is this a good stopping point to?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, I just want to check if anyone has any questions. Actually, I'm not seeing the video. It's in the text, so I'll just go ahead and continue.
We need to think about what branches we're going to remove. As you can probably see by this tree, it is very heavy in the top. We need to balance the growth out because it's a lot weaker in the bottom. One or two of these branches in the bottom will be coming off anyway because of where they're coming from in this section here. And also we've got a lot of clutter going on up in the top of this tree, so we will be starting to remove some of the branches out of here to push the energy further down. It is very important to get the balance of your tree, the growth of the tree working well for you. You must get the tree healthy before you do any major work to it. There's no point in having a nicely styled tree if it's dead. So you must get your trees nice and healthy first. Patience is paramount in bonsai. So what we're going to do is we're going to prep this tree up by reducing some of the needles, the old needles off it, so it makes it easier to wire, and also more importantly to balance the growth. Each one of these needles is a solar panel. The more it has on in certain areas, the more vigorous and more strength it's going to get in that area, and the ones with less needles on in the bottom of the tree are going to get weaker. Sap generally wants to rise and it's going to bypass these if there isn't the magnet of the foliage on the end to pull sap back and forwards to help that tree benefit from all of the growth on the end. So we're going to get rid of any really weak branches and we're going to get rid of some really strong stuff in the top so that the balance and the evenness of the foliage is generally pretty even all over the tree. So we're now going to start to take off some of the branches that are going to get rid of some of the clutter. We're going to be able to see that the line of the tree a little bit better. Predominantly where there's some branches that are too thick for the structure of the tree, we're going to be removing a few of those so that we're going to get taper in the branches and lighten everything up a little bit. So this particular branch here, it's very weak, it's coming out of the wrong place, it's the first one to go. I don't even think a gin there because I think again it would catch the eye in just the wrong place. So that one there comes off. I'll take that stub back a little bit as well. So further around the tree, you'll see we've got some quite heavy branches going on here. This is a good branch here. But we're going to take this heavy one off just in here. And we're also going to take this dead bit out as well. This section here is also very heavy. But we've got some nice movement and a nice bit taper in that big branch. So we're just going to prune it back to some nice growth where we can form foliage pad from all of this lot that's being left behind. We're also going to take out this heavy branch in the apex here, which is just a little bit too heavy for right up there. So again, off with its head. Now when we turn the tree round a little bit, we need some of these branches here to pull down to add some depth and some volume in the tree, but one or two of these are just a little bit too long, so again we'll take some of them out. And then there is another one here which again is getting a little bit too long, so we'll take that one out. And this one here again, too heavy for in the apex, so let's remove that one as well. A few more branches just to take off. We've got quite a long one coming in here with two that have got some nice taper to them, and they're going to form a nice foliage pad on this side. This one's just a little bit too long and a little bit heavy, so we're going to get rid of that one as well. And then finally, a little bit round the back here, there is quite a long one up in the apex that we're just going to remove just like that. So we're going to start wiring now, and it's very important to use the right gauge wire for this branch that we're going to bend. Now I'm using copper wire. Copper wire is generally about 1/3 the thickness of the branch that you want to bend. If you're using aluminium wire, it's about half the thickness. And it's very important that the wire is fit for purpose. It must do its job and bend the branch. So I'm going to start by putting some thick copper wire on along this section here and along this section here. So it's also very important that when you're using your wire, you have one piece of wire for 2 branches. Don't just wrap it round once along here. It must go along the length down here and go past this junction, couple of turns and stop there and come down here. This is the thickest one, not that one. So you bring it down here, you've gone past this junction. This is still quite thick, so you would stop around about here, and then eventually you will join this one and the rest of that one up together. So we're going to start, and I shall try my best not to take my back to you. Copper wire is always a little bit harder to put on, but if you get good quality, particularly the Japanese wire, you can get it on. It's very well annealed. If you do a couple of turns along this branch first, and then kind of go back over and take the wire down the branch, trying to keep the branch as still as possible so as not to damage it. Finish on the up and come back to this side. Move some of these branches out of the way a little bit. And again, and then finish on the up like so, and then just remove the ends. Now we need to join up this branch and this branch together with the appropriate gauge of wire. So I think what we'll use there is, we'll try copper wire's particularly good because it work hardens, so it gets tougher as you put it on. If you're not used to doing any wiring, I would suggest learning with aluminium wire first. It's a lot softer and easier to put on. But make sure your pitch, so the pitch in here is at a good angle with a nice gap in between. Certain species of tree, you can have that wire a little bit closer together for extra support. So as you can see, we're taking the wire right the way down past junctions, so then we can wire other branches together. We will use a guy wire to pull this branch, because we need to pull it forward, but we'll use a guy wire to pull this to here rather than putting some huge gauges of wire on, especially on the nice craggy bark, because it just knocks a lot of it off. So again, we're going to put some more thick-ish wire on this section here. So again, if we follow the line of the wire that's already on, If there has been wire on the tree before and there is some wire marks on it, try to take the wire in the opposite direction, or if it's not possible, try and obviously put the wire in between where the wire marks are. It is important, where conifers are concerned, that the wire, it actually bites in or has a slight indentation before you start to think about cutting it off. Otherwise, the branch is not going to hold. So we've got some thickish wire on there, and then we'll go down the gauges and start to put the finer stuff on. You always start with the thick gauges and then with the finer stuff. It is always better, if you must cross a wire and there's absolutely no option, obviously it's always better not to, but if there's no other option, cross over with a thin wire over the top of a thick, not the other way around. That can cause a lot of pressure on the area that's crossed, and it can do quite a bit of damage to the branch. Always try to think of the tree. The tree is of paramount importance. Its health comes before our ease of getting the wire on. So there, we've passed the junction, we're on to the end of that bit. We've come down here, trying to keep the branches as still as possible. Generally try and wire towards you. Obviously it's not quite so easy doing it when you're on camera, because we don't want to block the view for everybody. So it's a little bit of a right, there we go. Take that bit off there, that little bit off there. So as you can see, that's a little bit of the start of the wiring process. We will carry on doing some more wiring, and then I'll go through the process of building a foliage pad. This foliage pad here is the one I did a little bit earlier. I've wired the entire tree now, ready to go. So I've done this pad just to show everybody how I've set up a foliage pad and what it's going to look like. So if you look at how it's a C-shaped pad, comes right the way around here, bring it fair way around here. You don't want to be able to see the workings, which would be visible if you were viewing the tree in from the side that way and from the opposite side over here. So you need to bring your foliage a little bit more around there, and each little section of tuft of needles with bud pointing up to the light is giving it its space to grow and keep nice and healthy. Now, we'll often have to put a lot of movement into these branches to compact them, as keeping with this type of tree with a lot of movement in the trunk, it needs movement in the branches as well. But sometimes we'll have to get in there and do what I call spaghettification. And spaghettification is just pushing them branches in a little bit more and actually putting a bit too much contrived, if you like, movement in the branches just to compress the foliage in a little bit. But I will hasten to add that it is not meant to stay like that for the rest of the tree's life. It will get cut out over time to get back buds, so it'll get a lot more compact in here with foliage, but we'll still want to keep some nice movement in there because it'll be in keeping with the trunk. So again, C-shaped foliage pad, a bit of volume in the top with all the branches, them little fillers, the shorter, thinner branches as the fillers in the top, and it nice and clean and tidy along the bottom. and that is generally how you make up a foliage pad. So we're going to start to form some foliage pads here, and I'll guide you through what my thought process is while I am styling a foliage pad. So with this foliage pad here, I want to drop this down a little bit, but nothing too far that it's going to cover too much of this nice trunk here with a nice bit of movement in it, but we'll need to drop it down a little bit. But what I need to do with the foliage pad is identify which are the base branches, which are these thicker branches here, this one and this one here, and lay them down as what I call the base of the foliage pad. And then the other ones, the smaller ones, the likes of these that are a bit shorter on thinner twigs, I call these fillers. And so for now I'll pull them up out of the way, just so that I'm not going to damage them any in the forming of the base foliage pad. And then I will start to put a nice bit of back and forward movement in, a little bit of up and down. If you think about how twisty this trunk is on this tree, it's very likely that a lot of the branches were going to have quite a bit of movement in them as well. So we're going to put some movement in also to help compact the tree a little bit as well. Some branches we will need to twist to get some of the foliage going up in the right direction. And we're trying to form the C-shaped foliage pad that I mentioned earlier on the foliage pad I'd previously done in the bottom of the tree. So now I just rejig some of these bits of foliage around to form a nice bit start to the base of the foliage pad. We haven't got a massive amount to play with here, but it's surprising how much it can look full looking when you've manipulated some of the branches. See, this one here is going to be a filler, this one here is going to be a filler. So I'm just compressing these branches in. Pines are very, very flexible, they're pretty good for styling like this. They respond quite well to the styling process, they will backbud quite well. And this process, even on a Scots pine, can be done with any pine species. Because obviously a lot of you guys will very possibly not have worked Scots pines before, but it is applicable to all pine varieties. So now we're starting to get a bit of a C shape in the foliage pad. So now I'm going to start to bring down some of these smaller sections here, which are the fillers as I call it, and it's these here that start to form the volume in the pad, which is really important. So, and everything is given its own little bit of space to grow and get healthy out to the light and get the buds up to the light. The buds don't have to be pointing absolutely vertical. They can't, as long as they're getting a good amount of light, they'll be absolutely fine. So that's the start of a foliage pad starting to form just there. So now we have this branch at the back here, where we definitely need these back branches. One of the most important things about the design of bonsai is the tree must have depth and it must have negative spaces. These negative spaces are incredibly important. So I'm going to form this other foliage pad, it's at the back of the tree. So when we turn the tree round, you should be able to see a little bit of foliage peeping out from over the top of this bit of dead wood here. And there should be some foliage in this little gap here. So when you're looking at it from the front, you get that idea of a three-dimensional image with depth. So I'm going to start to form these branches exactly the same as we did before, setting those base branches down and then starting to fill in to form that volume with the filler smaller branches on the top. One thing to bear in mind when you're looking to style a tree, these branches here mustn't have any foliage on them. The foliage should start further along at the end of the foliage pad. You want an area of clearance with no foliage on, like these branches here, no foliage on. Your foliage is at the end of the foliage pad. So again, we're going to start to drop this down to form this back branch again. And what I do here is, if it's got quite a substantial bend, I'll rock the wood a little bit just to help stretch those wood fibres a little bit. Don't just get a hold of the branch and just give it a big tug, because chances are it might break. As I say, pines are very forgiving, but there is a limit. So, and again, we've pulled this section down, the bit at the back here, we're pulling that down. But because we've got a rather strange shape here, we're pulling this lot back up again. So again, lift the fillers up out of the way, just so that there's no damage done to them. The smaller little sections of foliage, and then we'll start to put again some little bit of back and forwards movement into these branches. Just move that one out of the way, and then again try to have this branch coming out on the outside of a bend rather than on the inside. And spread the foliage out. Again, tipping everything up to the light, twist some of the foliage so that the little buds. What I will be doing at the end is some of this long foliage here. It is absolutely perfect timing for cutting it back, the new foliage, to get some nice back budding along these branches here. Because to do candle pinching on a tree at this stage of development is a little bit of a fruitless task. It's only going to give you buds at this sort of area, and we want buds in here. So we need to do a little bit more hard pruning on the tree, and we need to push the growth a little bit further back. So we're going to be doing that at the end, and that will tidy up the tree as well. So again, just start to form this C-shaped foliage pad, just looking at where some of this foliage is coming from. So you can see this one here is quite long. So, and if you think about what else is on this branch.
Wanted to pause it for a minute so we can, since this question is fairly specific to what's being covered. Michael asks, this looks like the tree has this year's growth hardened off and last year's growth also. Have older needles been removed, or did they drop off? Do you expect to get buds on 1-year-old needle pairs?
This tree was left at second year needles on it to help the hormone levels and also to add extra vigor, because if you think about each needle is a solar panel, it's going to benefit the tree if they're left on a bit more. So because the tree I'd kind of left to do this demonstration, it's grown very well this year, and it has got some quite long extensions from this year's buds. But because it was just at the right time of the year to do this, a lot of them, this year's summer growth is actually pruned back a little bit later on to tidy the tree up right at the end in the appropriate places.
I'll start it again.
We've got a good one here. We've got a good one here. This one here is too weak. You see, if we were to cut all of this off here, all of this one there, that wasn't there. That is way too weak to survive on its own. But if we cut this one off here, that's a good strong one, that's a good strong one. This is going to be quite happy. So I'm actually going to cut off that whole section there, because it's a little bit too long and a little bit too gangly, and that sets the foliage parts just a little bit nicer. Now to start dropping in the fillers. A little bit of back and forward movement in there, dropping some of these small ones down just to give us that volume that really makes a nice full foliage pad. Don't be frightened to twist, they're really quite forgiving. Right at the end I'll give you a little talk about aftercare, which is extremely important for trees that have been styled like this. So, and then one of the final things we're going to do to this foliage pad, because it's getting further up the top of the tree, some of the foliage is getting a bit long. And as I mentioned before, because it's getting to the time of the year where you want to be cutting back some of that foliage, what we do here is, this is this year's foliage here. We will get in and we're going to cut that back, leaving some of this year's needles and obviously the last year's needles. So you'd want to do this before the bud in the end gets too long and too strong. Otherwise you've wasted quite a lot of the tree's energy, and we want to encourage back budding, so we'll get the tree to put its energy into producing buds further back rather than producing a bud right at the very end of it, which is just going to make the tree longer, and we want to compact it. So we're just taking out some of these long sections, still good good buds in there. And then one of the final things that we do at a foliage pad is just pluck off one or two of those bottom needles, because we do like a nice clean bottom. There we go. If anybody's got any questions at this bit, they could ask some questions while they watch the tree being styled.
So I don't have experience with Scots pine, but these don't look like they candle like the Japanese black pine. Can you explain the difference? And do they candle, or is it
the Scots pine is a single flush pine. It's a twin needled pine as well. The extent the candle is exactly the same as a black pine does, but how we handle it, we just you snap the tip out to stop the growth in that particular area. if you want to grow an area on, you let it extend. But the back bud very well if you prune them quite hard at the right time of the year. But they're a very, very forgiving tree and a brilliant species for bonsai.
Mike asks, what time of year are you doing this work?
This was done in the beginning of this month. Now, ordinarily, right, so now we're into the... Ordinarily, I would generally wait to start wire and style pines in the over the winter time. Well, maybe from about October time right up until about the end of March, April, when the new needles on the tree are not so easily knocked off. They're very easily damaged when they're quite new. But this tree had grown very well earlier on, and the needles had matured pretty much very early. We've had a bit of a strange year this year in the UK. The buds got very big in the ends very quickly, and the needles matured quite quickly. But as you'll know with all trees, you've got to treat each tree as an individual. You can't do every single Scots pine the same because you're doing something with that particular tree. Each one has to be treated as an individual. And this tree was kind of ready to be, the summer growth to be cut back and for it to be styled. So it was actually done in July.
Okay. Kathleen asks, do you work on Scots pine on the same schedule as Japanese black pine?
Sorry, repeat that again.
Do you work on Scots pine on the same schedule as a Japanese black pine?
Part of the styling process, part of it, yeah. But there is aspects of the black pine that I'll do a little bit later work on. Black pines, the needles can, in the UK anyway, they seem to take a lot longer to mature, and the needles can be still gaining length to them. Oh, even into September over here. So sometimes there's things we need to change. One of the key things is you've got to learn to read the tree. The tree will tell you when it's ready or it's not quite ready. So things like the maturity of the needles, how well the buds have formed, and that they're part of some of the main keys on when you know that the tree's going to need to be worked or not.
Okay.
The apex of the tree. This is the bit that seems to cause most people some issues, so hopefully I'll give you a few pointers in the direction of where to go. Now, I've mentioned previously about a foliage pad being made up of a C shape. So now with an apex, if you think of it more of an O that goes right the way around the tree, so not just a C that would be in one part of it, it needs to go right the way around the tree. And then instead of flattening everything, but with a little bit of volume, we need to elongate it up a little bit, not too much. We'll want to form a bit more of a dome on the top for maturity for the tree. And we'll also need to get that very top of the apex in exactly the right spot, so that it doesn't make it look like the tree's going to fall over. Often they look a little bit overbalanced. If the apex had its apex too much over this side, the tree would then, to me, look like it was going to fall over, and the balance wouldn't be quite correct. So you have to counterbalance it with the lean on the trunk, and also have a counterbalance branch on this side, while the flow of the tree comes down here. So we're going to stretch out this area here. It's not going to be too high, otherwise it's not going to look too good with this size of the tree if it's elongated up too much. So again, we're going to have an O along there, and we're going to elongate it up. What we want to do also is we want to blend the apex a little bit with the rest of the foliage parts higher up. You don't want what we call as the green helmet just sat on the top with too much of a negative space right the way around. It looks a little bit too detached. So we need asymmetry with the apex as well as asymmetry with the rest of the tree. Asymmetry always works a lot nicer. It's a more natural form than symmetry. So if you can get your trees in a more asymmetrical look, that always looks better. And the same with the apex. If we blend it so that it's asymmetrical with the rest of the tree.
If anybody has any questions now, it's a good time to bring them up.
Okay, right. So this is the finished.
We did have one question. What part of the UK are you at? Thank you very much, Phoenix Bonsai Society.
I live in the northeast of England, which is quite close to the Scottish border. So I'm quite a way up in England. And as I've already mentioned, like us all Brits we're pretty obsessed with the weather. It can be a bit rough up here at times. But yeah, northeast of England. Image of the tree. As you can see, it's all been pulled in. Everything is more compact. The flow of the tree as the trunk comes out of the ground and out of this nabari here, it's got nice bit flow up the tree, follows this nice lovely sinewy trunk, and then takes the flow down onto this side of the tree. We've got some nice placed foliage pads that take up the asymmetrical triangular formation. Nice bit negative space in between so that the light and air can get through there quite sufficiently. So the finished image is there with the apex. It obviously isn't over the top of the nabari where you would have one on an informal upright or a formal upright tree, because this is a semi-cascade, so the apex is obviously off to one centre, not too far, so that it looks like the tree's going to fall over. So we've got a good amount of foliage at the back there for depth, just so when you look through the tree, some of this foliage in here catches your eye and just gives you that three-dimensional feel. Now, one major thing you've probably noticed about this tree is it still has this big brace on. Now, one of the key problems that this tree had was this very straight section here. Now, we're in the process of addressing that. It was very, very straight before. We're pulling it in to this trunk. We are going to pull it in a little bit more at a later date. So the brace is still on it. We've got some wire on to take the strain. And again, that will be fixed off and then the brace will be able to come off. But now you can see, instead of it being vertical, it actually comes in quite a way. And as I say, we'll bring it in a little bit further and then that'll follow quite a nice line as it goes up the tree like that. So that's the finished image for now. It's still got a lot of development to do, a lot more ramification, more bud development in here, and the way we get that is by pruning a lot of this new growth back, which I've actually done now, and we'll get some new buds popping in there, and we'll be able to take out some of the little bit of spaghettification that I've done to compress the image a little bit. So there it is. That's the tree for today, for its first stage of development. Still a long way to go, but that's the image set.
Mike says, so that's the tree behind you after 1 month.
It is indeed. This is the tree behind here, and the brace is off, as you can see, and it's still happy. It's romping away there. Obviously, aftercare. You mentioned aftercare there before. Aftercare is extremely important. The best thing to do whenever you've done any major work to a tree is don't be tempted just to stick it back out on the benches, especially in the summertime when you do get a lot of sunlight, you guys get, because that stresses the tree out quite considerably. So I would always be tempted to put the tree in a more shady spot for a little while, just for a couple of weeks, because obviously pines like the sun. And they'll want to go back into the sun quite quickly to get the buds developing on them. But it's just the initial aftercare, just to give the tree, it's almost like going into ICU department, because it's had a bit of a stressful time with us wiring and styling and twisting branches around. So mist the tree over the foliage. Obviously, don't let it get too dry, but don't keep it too wet as well. Just I'll often put them in a place where there's a nice bit of humidity comes up around the tree. So on a gravel bed, or if it's placed on a bench in a shady spot, just hose the ground down underneath it. And that brings the humidity up around the top. But I always like to mist the top of the foliage as well. Now, I know in certain areas you've got to be careful, and I don't generally wet the foliage on my trees anyway. I mean, we get plenty of rain that wets the foliage anyway, so I don't like to compound the problem. But we do get needle cast over here as well, and the junipers get Phomopsis tip blight, and it's spread a lot by the wet. So I like to keep the foliage as dry as possible. But aftercare, I think it is very important to just help the tree by just misting the foliage a little bit and putting it in the shade for a few weeks before you pop it back out in the sun.
Okay. Do you have advice for dealing with Phomopsis twig blight?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what I use here. Phomopsis tip blight can be a bit of a pain, shall we say, when you start to see the tips obviously going that brown, the grey, and then the dropping off. You need to be on the ball with just removing that as fast as you can. Don't just leave it, it will spread. So remove it, keep the tree as dry as possible, foliage-wise. So don't put water over the top of the foliage, because any of the fungal problems are spread by water droplets. Now, I do use Mancozeb. I think you guys get Mancozeb as well. And I'll maybe use that a couple of times in the year as a bit of a preventative measure. So
is that the powder?
Sorry?
Is that the powder?
Mancozeb.
Oh no, Mancozeb is a spray, right?
Mancozeb's a fungicide.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now over here we can get this stuff from a company called ProBioCarbon, which is an Irish company. Now I think they have started sending stuff over to the US, because I think Ryan Neal uses it. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I know he did a podcast with Karen O'Hanlon about the products that she produces, and one of the products is called Maru, and it is very good for spraying on and getting disease resistance up in your trees. So if you can get a hold of it, it is a good product. It's a natural product from Irish bacteria.
Mike asks, are you seeing any back budding on this Scots pine yet?
A little tiny bit, yes, where I've pruned back the summer growth. Usually you get it when it comes fairly quickly. I've noticed it's within the junctions between this year's growth and last year's growth, and then a little bit later on you'll get more prolific budding on the more lignified branches a little bit further back, but they haven't started because it's still a little bit early yet. But you also, it's very important to feed well as well now, like really push the fertilizer to get to get back budding on your trees whenever you've done any major work to them. Just this type of work particularly, because we're wanting back budding, to feed very well. Yeah.
Let's see. Jennifer Williams of Phoenix Bonsai Society says, amazing transform, beautiful. What do you recommend? What do you recommend in warm weather for warm weather care? Do you have to worry about it?
What do I recommend in what, sorry?
What do you recommend for warm weather care?
Warm weather care.
Or is that something you have to worry about?
Well, believe it or not, it does happen from time to time. And a couple of years ago, we had, and I think it was around the world almost, there was some really severe hot spells over here. London got in the 40s, and that's not usual at all. It was about 38 up here, which is very rare. I mean, hot weather here is about 25 maybe. It never ever gets into the 30s, never. But it got 38, and my back garden is a sun trap, so it does get quite hot in places. So what I do when the weather does get hot, and it is important to protect your trees, because them pots get very hot. I mean, when you touch the pot, you can feel it on your hand how hot they get. And that doesn't do those roots any good whatsoever. A friend of mine, he was repotting trees after this very hot spell, and he noticed when he knocked this little Chinese juniper out of a pot that the front of the roots at the front of the pot, they were black, they were rotten, and it wasn't anything to do with the wet, it was the heat. The roots had literally cooked on the inside of the pot where they were touching the pot wall, and they were majorly damaged. And then later on in the winter time, we had freezing temperatures. It gets sometimes down to -12 here, and the pots sometimes freeze, which doesn't do them any good whatsoever. We give them protection from that normally, but sometimes it catches you. But where the heat's concerned, what I do is I put wet towels over the tops of the pots, and that keeps the pot cool and it keeps the moisture in, and it's protected my trees massively from any because obviously your trees get acclimatized to the garden and where you live, and if you have these sudden spells of unusual weather that even the trees aren't used to, that can knock them out of sorts. So yeah, the wet towels over the tops of the pots has been a good one to help any kind of major heat that we've had.
And do you need to re-wet the towel throughout the day, or does
yeah, because them towels they will dry off in the heat of the sun. So periodically I'll go out with the hose pipe and I'll just give them a soaking again, and it just keeps them damp. I check. You can't really keep the towels on the tops of the pots for a substantial amount of time, like I'm talking about days on end, because remember the tree is still sucking water out of the growing medium, and often a wet towel over the top, when you look underneath the towel, it'll give you a false sense that the growing medium's damper than it actually is, if you scrape under the surface, it can actually be a little bit drier. So just be aware of that. Usually on a night time when it cools down a little bit, I'll peel the towels off the top of the pot and let the air get to the growing medium. And then if it's going to be another hot day, I'll soak the towels down. I'll make sure the tree's nicely wet, and I'll put the towels back on the top.
Okay. Let's see, are there any other questions? I think maybe that's it for questions. All right, so is there anything else that you wanted to cover, Caz?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit there. I believe Kelly Lou's there, so hi Kelly. And I saw her when I came over a couple of years ago. So
oh, we do have one more question. Do you use sphagnum moss for cooling?
Yes, I do use sphagnum moss. Sometimes just after I've done a repot, because it's very important that the tree does not dry out after a repot. It's a big killer of newly repotted trees. If that growing medium gets too dry, you can nearly almost not overwater after a repot because the water just whooshes straight through. And to help the growing medium not dry out quite so much, I put a layer of sphagnum moss over the top of the pot. I have been known in the past to use a little bit of chopped sphagnum moss in the mix, but I'm very careful with what species of tree I do that with. I'll probably do that more with deciduous trees rather than conifers.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in. So I think we'll go ahead and conclude the demonstration. I want to thank everybody that showed up for this. We had a really great showing. And thank you very much, Caz, for doing a great demonstration. This is really, really interesting, really fun. I learned a lot myself. So really great presentation. So
thank
yeah, thank you everyone
for
coming.
So thanks everybody for watching. I hope it's been informative for everybody.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap things up then. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.